in the middle of World War II, the United States built a secret empire inside its own borders. An empire so large it quietly rivaled entire industries. So power-hungry, it pulled a staggering share of the nation's electricity. And so classified that the people living inside it had their mail monitored, their phones tapped, and their world reduced to one rule: don't ask questions. It was the most expensive scientific project on Earth at the time, and it wasn't aimed at a new airplane or a better tank. It was aimed at a weapon that could end a war in a single flash. Between 1942 and 1946, this effort, known as the Manhattan Project, became a race against time, fear, and physics itself, led by the United States, with key collaboration from the United Kingdom and Canada. At its peak, it employed nearly 130,000 people and cost close to $2 billion in 1940s dollars, a figure that today translates into an almost unimaginable modern scale. The story starts before America even officially entered the war. In 1939, when Europe was already on fire, and the idea of an atomic weapon stopped sounding like science fiction. A warning reached Franklin D. Roosevelt through a letter drafted by Leo Szilard and signed by Albert Einstein, urging the United States to take seriously the possibility that Nazi Germany might build an atomic bomb first. That fear, whether fully proven in the moment or not, was enough to trigger the earliest steps. Then, everything accelerated after attack on Pearl Harbor. Once the U.S. entered the war, the question wasn't just, could this be done? But could it be done fast enough? To keep it secret and to move at the speed the government demanded, the project didn't build one lab. It built an entire network. Facilities and laboratories spread across the United States and into Canada, creating what would later be called secret cities, places that essentially didn't exist on public maps in any normal way. One of the most famous was Los Alamos, chosen for its remoteness and controlled access. Incredibly, by the height of the wartime sprint, Los Alamos had a population of about 6,000 people focused on one purpose: turning theory into a working bomb. Another gigantic hub was Oak Ridge, which exploded into a boom town of wartime urgency, reaching around 75,000 people by 1945. And then there was a detail that still shocks modern audiences when you say it out loud. A National Park Service account quotes General Kenneth Nichols describing Oak Ridge as consuming as much as 1/7 of all electricity produced in the United States from 1943 to 1945. 1/7. That's not a lab. That's a national-scale industrial machine built in secret. At the center of this machine were two very different kinds of leadership. One was military, embodied by Leslie Groves, the hard-driving general who demanded schedules, security, and results. The other was scientific, embodied by J. Robert Oppenheimer, the brilliant, complicated mind chosen to direct the bomb design work at Los Alamos. The combination mattered because the Manhattan Project wasn't a single discovery. It was an avalanche of problems that all had to be solved at once. Scientists and engineers had to figure out how to produce enough fissile material, how to separate isotopes at scale, how to design a device that would actually work, and how to do it before the war's outcome and the geopolitical future changed around them. And then comes the moment that makes this story feel like a movie, even though it's real. The first full-scale test. On July 16th, 1945, in the New Mexico desert, the Manhattan Project detonated the first nuclear device in history, the Trinity test. The test worked. The physics proved itself in the most violent, undeniable way possible. By then, the European war had already turned. Nazi Germany surrendered on May 8th, 1945. But the Pacific War continued, and Japan had not surrendered. The weapon that began as a race, driven by fear of what the Nazis might achieve, became, in the final months, a weapon that would reshape how the world understood war itself. What happened next remains one of the most debated decisions in modern history, and you can tell it in a way that grips Americans without turning it into propaganda. The decision-making pressure, the projected costs of a land invasion, and the desire to end the war quickly collided in Washington. Harry S. Truman and his advisors chose to use atomic bombs against Japan in August 1945, arguing that the alternative, a full-scale invasion, could produce catastrophic casualties. The Manhattan Project, built in secrecy, suddenly became visible to the entire planet in the most permanent way possible. It announced the arrival of the nuclear age. Yet the Manhattan Project didn't simply vanish when the war ended. It transitioned into a new era of government control and long-term policy. Because a weapon this powerful couldn't remain just a wartime improvisation. In 1946, the U.S. government passed the Atomic Energy Act, creating the Atomic Energy Commission to take over and continue the work under civilian authority. An institutional shift that marked how the United States planned to manage nuclear technology moving forward. The Manhattan Project's legacy then branched in two directions at once: one path toward weapons and deterrence, and another toward science, energy, medicine, and the ethical reckoning that followed the realization of what had been built. And as the world stepped into the Cold War, the same traits Americans often admire in their national story — scale, speed, organization, engineering ambition, and a culture of problem-solving under extreme pressure — were all on display here, for better and for worse, in a project that proved the United States could mobilize minds and industry on a level no other nation had ever attempted.